Welcome to Reality Test. I'm Dr. Ray.
And I'm Dr. Kay. Feel free to check in and take a seat wherever you like. Not funny next sentence, which I usually try to go for something just like half formed that I didn't plan that it will just fall out of my mouth. But in this case, this is quite serious, right? That's like sort of my jam. In this case, this is quite serious. We're talking about Real Housewives of New York and their finale because, as was mentioned, this is a dark moment. I don't think we think of it as dark in the same way other people do. And that's sort of where we're coming in with a different angle. And, you know, frankly, I haven't seen anybody else take this perspective. So that's alarming to me, but also could be that this is an interesting podcast episode for you to listen to. So it's also an expansion of the mental health checkup that came out last Saturday. So check that out too if you'd like some additional mental health sort of concepts to go with what we're going to talk about today.
Very well said. Before we get started, one more pleasant thing. We're just going to do some brief check-ins today because this is kind of a different tenor of episode, if you will. I do want to say I went out last night for my birthday.
Ooh,
34.
Happy birthday.
Thank you so much. And I met someone. I met their mother, and we were chatting. And she was such a lovely woman. She bought our drinks, which was so nice. She did not have to do that. But she was telling me about her daughter, who also works at this establishment, who used to be a bartender in Charleston for like a number of years. And I was like, I have some questions. I immediately went to Southern Charm because I'm like, I know those boys frequent those bars all the time.
Sure do.
So I was like, tell me, lovely human, did you see Shep, Austin, Craig, etc. at the bars? And she said, yes, I did all the time. And they are just as bad as how they're portrayed on TV. She's like, I don't even think it's an unfair portrayal. Like that is who they are. This waitress bartender had seen much of these men and seconds Bravo's take on them. She's like, I don't think it's an unfair portrayal at all.
Great news.
So
that's great news.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you for your accurate reporting. Bravo on the Southern Charm men. I think you are spot on. And the first thing I thought, I was like, I have to share this on the podcast because this is just hilarious.
Yes. So on target. It's so nice to know that our distaste for how they often are is well planted, deserved.
Absolutely. You got to trust service workers on these things. They see.
Yes. As a prior waitress myself, I definitely think we have the inside scoop often on what people are like. It says a lot about somebody, how they treat the waiter or the server.
Yes.
It says so much. And I think, and the host and the bartender, and the barista, whatever, every level, how you treat people who are working around you says so much about you. So the fact that she felt that they were rude and up themselves says so much. So I love to know that. It definitely reifies how we feel. Did you say anything about how they look?
Yes. She said, she was also like, they're not even attractive. None of them are attractive, which is interesting. I actually don't think Shep is bad looking. I will give him that. Like, I don't, I'm not like,
I don't mind him either.
Shep.
Yeah. But Austin is the one where I'm like,
yes. Austin is confusing to me, but she seconded the idea that there are like a lot of women in Charleston and not that many men. So I think men like our Austins get an inflated sense of their attractiveness, which lucky for them, attractiveness is sexy to women, which is unfortunate because I got to say, I think he's confidence is sexy. Unfortunately, I don't think he can really back up his belief in himself, but
no. And I think also the height piece helps too, which is like, I've always figured that's what it was about Austin. It's just that he's tall.
Yes, that he's dated all these women and it's tumultuous. And so then it's like it's kind of like the Pete Davidson effect,
Well put,
like it's almost like a status symbol to date Pete Davidson now, which is so interesting.
It is. Although Pete Davidson is also funny AF. And I think humor is a really important characteristic. It's very attractive when somebody can be funny and riff with you. Like if they can kind of go back and forth with you and riff a little bit, it's so attractive. And I don't see that with Austin. It doesn't mean he doesn't have it, but I just don't see it. Frankly, like, same with Shep. Like, I don't know that he has that either. I don't see, like, the banter. There's no bants. No sexy bants.
No.
So I'm a pass on that.
Yeah. Craig's not much of a banterer either. And
No.
he's a different thing. He's kind of like a petulant child to me. And I think Paige has said as much, but, you know.
I think, I can't remember exactly. I listened to her breakup podcast. I get the sense that they did used to laugh a lot together, which is nice. But yeah, I don't know that it's through the bants per se, through banter or really, what it is, frankly. But I do think that laughter is key. And that's something that was missing in my first marriage, that very much in my second marriage, I was like, right, this is what that's supposed to feel like. And it's just so key. And a big part of enjoying your life, you know, and having that inner child piece is an aspect of it, but it doesn't need to be the whole thing. Like, we just, like, you know, riff off each other and just go back and forth. You know, even at like the grocery store, trying to make the grocery store person laugh and just sort of like hitting off each other's jokes to try to see if we can get them to smile. And we just have so much fun with it. It's a joy.
That's adorable.
It's a joy. We started saying, oh, you're taking them down to Price Chopper, you know, because it's the name of our grocery store, Price Chopper. So if we're trying to make somebody laugh, we're like, oh, you're taking them down to Price Chopper, you know, taking them down to where the comedy show is, where we try to make them laugh.
Where you practice your act kind of thing.
Exactly. It's our like practice club, comedy club.
Oh,
yeah.
I love it.
It's a joy.
I use lectures for that. I really try out jokes in that space.
Excellent.
You get some feedback. I can't tell how accurate the feedback is, but you get something. Sometimes
there's a little bit of people pleasing sometimes, but
exactly. Sometimes there's I want to get a good grade in this class, so I'm going to laugh at that joke, which is kind, I guess.
I'll still take that over dead silence, and I guess that is the gift of doing it in class. Is like at the very least you'll get the politically or correct or like the sort of the people pleasing laughs. That's a nice thing. There's no real basement there. There's no real floor effect of total silence or like booing or echo crickets or anything. That's so true. Yeah, I like making
you never know. You can get some booing. Non-verbally.
Different form indeed. Exactly. And then negative evaluations, which is not fun, of course, too, if that happens. But no, I think that the humor is a big part, too, I think, of what students enjoy about our classes. So you got to bring humor wherever you go. My clients as well. I'm using, humor when used appropriately and not just like to make fun of something or as a way of like, you don't want to use it defensively to avoid a hard conversation. But if you're using it as a way of in regular old rapport building to sort of like keep it funny, then it's an appealing quality.
It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. Sort of kind of adjacent to the laughter part is that I've been watching this alien show from National Geographic.
Ooh.
It's one of those things, you know what I mean? I like sci-fi, but also aliens, there's just like irrefutable proof at this point, so I just don't even want to hear it. Of course they're aliens. So it's like, absolutely. I've actually added that to my like positionality questions, like what are your religions? What are your da-da-da-da? Also, do you believe in aliens? Like, we need to know right up top. What were we doing with that? So,
that's
right?
amazing.
It says a lot, and I think it's interesting. And I also think, again, the fact that like the Navy has released footage and the Congress, stuff. So anyway, point being, watching a National Geographic show, and they're talking about Dr. Hynek. And Dr. Hynek was this guy from a while ago. He was on a old school reality TV show way back. I forget exactly what it's called, but the whole point is that there's 3 people who pretend to be this certain person, and then the people on the panel have to guess which one of the 3 of it is. And so Dr. Hynek was on there with 2 other people, and they were all 3 pretending to be Dr. Hynek, and they have to answer questions, and then the panel has to guess which one is the right one. So what a weird, what a weird concept, such an interesting early day reality TV show. And the line that the host says at the end is, "Will the real Dr. Hynek please stand up?" So that is what that motherfucking thing is from. Yep. That's where will the real Slim Shady please stand up is from that show.
Wow. That is wild.
Easily like 50s. You know what I mean? I guess it was 70s, but it was all black and white. Like it was very early days TV. So it's definitely where Marshall Mathers got his "Will the real Slim Shady please stand up," which I've always just thought was his phrase. Like I didn't even really realize it was from culture. Yeah. I didn't even realize that to begin with, let alone an old school, funny, like reality TV show. So go reality TV. We also had an influence as a field and a culture on Eminem.
Yes. Wow. What a deep cut. Thank you so much for sharing. I have learned something excellent today.
Exactly. It is kind of excellent. I was like, I will take this with me. I'm enjoying this. That
is a fun nugget.
Yeah. And what a nice, like, treat before we head into the deep, which we will do now as we talk about what happened with Real Housewives of New York. So worth mentioning, even if you don't watch Real Housewives of New York, I really think there is a lot of content here that could be helpful and useful and to be thinking about. So stick around. You might find there's stuff to learn without knowing the characters at play. Again, before we go into as well, I just wanted to share our goals for our Patreon because we're going to try to do that at the top of each episode. And so we talked a lot about on the episode related to Traitors episode 5. You'll hear a little bit more about our spiel on this, but the main point just being that we're at a point where we are losing money by doing this for free, and we don't pay our sound person who's so extraordinary, and we want to keep it afloat. So our goal is that we hope that by 2 weeks from when this episode comes out, and actually, in fact, I don't know when this episode precisely will come out yet, so let me say it instead as by February 10th, if we don't have 20 new members, paid members, but they could be any tier. So tier 1, 2, 2, or 3. If we don't have 20 members, we really are going to try to think about what we're doing next. And, at least cutting down, if not completely stopping, which would be really sad. We even know there have been other psychologist podcasts that have cropped up after us. And so they liked my idea. They like the idea of psychologists getting in on talking about reality TV. So help us because we are the OGs and we would really love your help to keep us afloat. So that's our first goal. And our second goal is that by this time in a month, which by the time this episode is, I have no clue, but by the 24th of February, we're hoping to have 50 members in order to give our goal, which is $10 to the ACLU every month. And so that is the goal in terms of helping our dark world that we are living in. And we hope to reach that goal so we can give that donation in addition to keeping ourselves afloat. So thank you very much. It's patreon.com/realitytest, or you can search using the @ symbol reality test. Thank you. We'll talk about it again at the end of the episode briefly, but let's launch right in. So as background context, I want to share that I cut the notes to just basically when the stuff starts because there is more of an episode before it, and I just skipped right through it because the more important stuff is the real content. So, but what we do need to know from previous episode, or just as context, is that Ubah, who is a tall black supermodel from Somalia, said to Brynn, who is a biracial, white-presenting woman who works in PR, she said to her at one point during a fight, "I don't know if you slept with someone to get this job, meaning this job." And that was on the Sprinter van on the way home from a night out. And that piece really got to Brynn. Sometimes they'll fight and Brynn sort of pretends to be the cool cucumber, but in this case, she stood up and really argued back about it. Aaron, Brynn, and Sai are 3 friends that are old school friends, but have recently sort of recollected themselves because they fell apart as a friendship group. They're sitting by the pool discussing Jessel, who is sort of the outsider of that friend group. And they said that they figured out from Jessel's statement that Pavat, her husband, is not really the love of her life. It's someone else, but she wasn't allowed to be with that person because that person was an Indian. And Jessel and her parents are Indian, and her parents said no go. So they catch themselves, however, talking about Jessel and sort of make fun of themselves for having to gossip in order to feel close to one another. And Brynn tells us that they're back to their old dynamic, which unfortunately necessitated talking shit about Jessel. So the other piece just worth knowing for context is that Aaron ends up telling Jessel that Brynn and Sai, the other 2 of the triad, had spoken about Jessel, but that she, Aaron, had just sat there while they did. We know for sure that's not the case. Yeah, we know the 3 of them were all talking. So Jessel then confronts Sai and says, well, Aaron told me you 2 were talking shit. And Sai was like, excuse me? She didn't say that she was also part of this? Let's talk. So that's the context. Take it away for the next piece.
Yes. So early in the evening, Sai pulls Aaron, Brynn, and Jessel into a room to get Aaron to explain to Jessel that Aaron was also talking shit about Jessel, that it was not just Sai and Brynn, as Aaron had previously suggested. Aaron explains that she just spoke up about Sai being upset with Pavat because of what Pavat said about her. What did Pavat say about her again?
He said that she's bipolar. And that she's a bitch, I think. Yeah. And so he even said when asked about it, he doubled down, I'd call her a bitch again or whatever, So he was just really deep in with that. Very ableist, very problematic. But worth mentioning that Sai had also accused Pavat of cheating on Jessel when he would go to Vietnam. So Jessel even said in a testimonial, well, I guess it's even because you said this about him. But it's really not, I don't know. They're both problematic, but really the ableism piece is deep because Sai's mom is bipolar.
Right. It was a mean thing for him to say, I think maybe knowingly so. Sai explains that she is still mad at Pavitt for what he said about Sai's mental health, and Jessel owns it and apologizes. But like you said, she said to camera that I guess they're even. Then they're all hugging. Yeah, so she's kind of playing both sides there a little bit.
Which is also my first segment because it's about something we thought people would mention the following day because it's important, but they didn't. This is just one part of the two things. One for me is about gossip because they give Brynn a whole lot of shit about gossiping, but they literally, Aaron had a way of turning Sai's confrontation of Aaron into them confronting Jessel, who was the ultimate scapegoat for that trio. So the trio had already scapegoated Jessel to begin with their first gossiping. Then when Sai goes to confront Aaron for backing out of her part in that, all Aaron had to say was, I was just standing up for Sai because she was still upset about Pavitt. So then suddenly Sai has to turn to Jessel and explain why she's still upset. And suddenly it became about Jessel defending Pavitt and herself. And so then they're hugging and apologizing and crying and happy together. And not another word is mentioned about Aaron. So it's thick scapegoating of Jessel.
Mm-hmm. Not
and
okay.
Gossip. The other piece about it that's sociopolitical that I thought people would mention too is that gossip is not it's a sexist term because it's been used to pejoratively talk about women's talk. And I try to use the term women's talk in general. They use the term gossiping, which is why I repeat it. And the idea is that patriarchy wants to relegate women's talk to the margins when really, frankly, it's an important source of, for example, whisper networks. And we find out Weinstein people, Me Too was built on it. Figuring out how to identify microaggressions happens in the context of women talking about relationships. So it's just been derogated as like a bad kind of form of talk when in fact it's just the way women focus on relationships, which is healthy and normal. So even though we shouldn't necessarily use it to scapegoat, it is a form of conversation that's actually important. So
absolutely. Yeah. Very well said.
Thank you.
So another thing that happens is Brynn and Ubah continue the argument from earlier. Brynn is so upset about Ubah saying she sucked dick for her job. Ubah says, I didn't say that. I said slept with. And actually they rolled the tape back. And it seems like Ubah did say something slightly different than what Brynn heard. And Brynn is taking this as meaning that Ubah thinks she didn't say any of it when she just means the sucking dick versus slept with. And Ubah leaves. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just want to say, I think this is an important symbol of the fact that like we can rewrite experiences in our head in like a very rapid way. Like, and so Brynn genuinely believed that that's what Ubah said. And no one's calling that out as like she lied, right? Like, because she genuinely believed that's what Ubah said. It's not meant to be a lie. It's just a misremembering. And she feels conviction about it.
Absolutely. Which is very fair. Ubah leaves the room and then Brynn continues yelling and crying. She then says that Ubah is just a dress barn bottle, no Naomi, no Giselle, which is a mean thing to say and totally unwarranted.
Very
Ubah
hurtful.
says Naomi wishes, Giselle wishes, which is funny and like a fun quip. Yeah. Brynn continues screaming after Ubah as she leaves the room, calling her a petulant toddler. Raquel then gets up and hugs Brynn after Ubah leaves. And then Raquel, Jenna, and Jessel stay behind. And Brynn asks, why can't a Black woman be successful? Can a Black woman make money? Ubah doesn't say that. What do you mean? Is what one of them says.
No, that was me. I'm sorry. I was like, what do you mean?
Okay.
Like, Ubah clearly doesn't think that about you because she makes money too and she's a Black woman. It was almost like she forgot that Ubah was Black, or like she thinks she's more Black than Ubah, which colorism-wise is not true.
Yeah, absolutely. That was my socio-political moment because of the history of kind of colorism that was discussed on this season. And Brynn kind of saying, oh, can't a Black woman make money? I agree. It's a little confusing because clearly Ubah is a Black woman too, and you are undercutting what she does, which felt shitty and shady for really no reason. So it's already kind of like the fight is going low in a way that I don't think is helpful.
It's not. I totally agree. And the colorism is rampant, and it shows that Brynn is sort of like past the point of sort of like, maybe it's drinking or something, but she's sort of saying things that just genuinely do not make sense and like logically don't make sense. And so this brings us into the controversial events beginning, because she's like really in that place where it's sort of like, whoa. She then is sort of venting to Ubah, to Raquel, Jessel, and Jenna. And she starts like yelling at them. Like she's basically saying, let's go tell your sons. Let's go tell your sons. Let's go tell your son that you sucked dick for your job. She's like, because my future kids are going to watch this. And those three folks have sons who are living and in the world. And I think there's something about that. Like, while that should be seen as the same as her having a future son, if she feels like she's definitely going to have a son, it is actually different. And there's something about like, then they're in a place, it's actually like considered sort of like cognitive, I won't use the word. It doesn't really matter. The whole point is that like takes them somewhere cognitively that they don't need to be taken, and sort of like it's to prove a point. But I think that really sends Raquel over the edge a little bit, because then Raquel finally says, Brynn, stop. Like you're sort of spinning in circles and making yourself more upset by ruminating. And it's true. Like she's making a point, but it still was like sort of like an extra step. So, but the thing is, in my thought, that what is that when Raquel finally says, stop, that Brynn starts to realize she's losing them. Like she no longer has them like fully on board with her. And so then she makes an extra point to sort of like paint Ubah a villain and to see her as the worst between the two of them. And she says she's been in group therapy for sexual assault. And that when Ubah made the comment about Brynn sleeping with a producer for the job, Ubah knew that Brynn had been sexually assaulted. So she says she knew that. This is where I said, therapy. This is where mention of therapy comes up for me, just because she mentioned being in group therapy. I do think that means she's not in individual therapy, or she would have mentioned that. And I do hope she sees an individual therapist. As always, I think we all could benefit, but sexual assault in particular is really pernicious and can really affect your self-esteem among many things.
Absolutely.
Raquel, Jenna, and Aaron react very strongly. Jenna is even crying during the moment. Raquel cries in her testimonial. Jenna says to us, I cannot imagine that Ubah would make a comment like that, knowing this information. I would imagine that's something sacred and that we wouldn't cross that line. My critique of that is, isn't it sacred anyway? Like, I think implying that a woman slept with someone to have her job is like giving into the patriarchal views of women as being valuable only for their bodies, but also the view of them as they can't be this high in their position unless they slept with someone. Like it's like reifying what the patriarchy already does to us, which is to say that we are not deserving of our positions, that we must have slept with someone to get it. And it reifies what patriarchy does in terms of seeing us only valuable as our bodies. So I actually think it crosses the line anyway. But granted, it is also extra obviously problematic if she knew in particular that. The other issue I have with it, by the way, just really quickly, is that like 70% of women have at least experienced sexual harassment. So sexual violence is 70% of women have experienced something under that umbrella. So you can bet somebody in that room or the victim when she said that comment. So I think that in that way too, it's crossing a line. So absolutely. Raquel says to us that she can't even look at Ubah right now. Raquel makes sure that no one tells Aaron, for example. Like Aaron's like, what's going on? And Jenna's like crying and she's like, what is it? And Raquel was like, it's not ours to tell, which I appreciated. Right. I get the intent behind that. It's not your sexual violence to talk about. So Aaron's still confused though. Jenna, it's one of those moments where you can tell Jenna has a little bit of different social experience and a skill, maybe related to her medical disorders from childhood and so forth. But she sort of says like, oh, like I know I can't tell you, but like, just be good to Brynn. Like that's all I can tell you. Just be good to her. Which is just like, like one of those things where it's like, meh. Yeah, it's like, it's not really like now you're making it about you being upset and you're like holding this over people. You're saying like, I know. And like, all I can tell you is be nice to Brynn. So it just was like a very misplaced reaction. And I think it's something that Raquel probably clocked. But yeah, anyway, she can't explain it. So she just says, be nice to Brynn. So this inspires all of them to encourage Ubah to apologize to Brynn because they can't tell Ubah why they feel this new conviction. So they just channel it into saying, just please talk to Brynn. Like all you have to do is say you're sorry. So Ubah says no. She rejects it at first. And then she finally says, okay, fine. She tries to apologize. Brynn, you could tell right away, was like... literally like textbook patriarchy winning. So ideally we can move towards understanding everybody's context and having forgiveness and love. Not easy necessarily, but definitely the way forward. So
love that.
I know we're way over time. Check out our social media at Dr. Kay Ray Pods, at Dr. Ray Pods. TikTok is at dr.realitytv, REALITV. Both Facebook and YouTube are at Reality Test Pod. And I would say that our email is realitycheckpodding@gmail.com. And please join our Patreon at patreon.com/realitytest. We're hoping that we have 20 members by 2 weeks from now and hoping to have 50 by a month from now so that we can start donating $10 a month to ACLU.
Yay! Amazing. download us, and we'll see you next session.
Bye, bye, bye.